Attorney General Steve Marshall, what goals do you plan to accomplish in 2018?
Well, there's several things that we're working on right now. One of the most important has to do with the opioid initiative that we've started along with a council that was formed by Governor Ivey. That's one of the things that's important for us because we're losing, at least 170 lives plus per day in this country to overdose. And one of the things we got to do is be able to make a difference. Alabama leads the country in opioid prescriptions per capita, and that's one of the things we've been trying to figure out. But more importantly is to sort of understand how it is that we got here and then how it is that we're going to go forward. And so we have a 27-point plan that we got to make sure that we implement. The governor signed a bill yesterday to enforce one of those particular recommendations. And so we'll be continuing to work really hard on that over the next several months to try to make sure that we're doing things to allow Alabama to progress in that area. So that's one thing. We continue to work in the area of public corruption. And so we have an ethics law revision that's out there that have suggested changes for us so that not only do we clarify our ethics law so that people know exactly what the standards are, but also make sure that we filled some loopholes in that we think that we need to do because, when you're a public official or a public employee, there's an element of trust to that for the public, and they need to make sure that they can believe in their government and the people that are working there are ethical, and that we make sure that we stop those who aren't. So that continues to be a focus. We're going to work in this world of human trafficking. It is a crime that most folks don't know about, they don't see, and maybe that somehow or another we have not treated correctly over the years. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is to broaden awareness through a program called Demand an End, so that we're increasing awareness out to communities to make sure that they understand exactly what it is and how we can investigate and prosecute those cases, but also provide services to victims. And then finally, I guess for us, is that we continue to talk about this issue of school safety. We'll be around the state over the coming weeks here soon, identifying those schools that are doing school safety correctly, but also we'll be convening a group to be able to talk about, evaluating where we are in Alabama. Are there additional things that we can do to make sure that we're keeping young people safe and allow for schools to be appropriate educational institutions of learning and not have people worry about whether or not when they come to school that they're at risk. I think we're doing that well in Alabama, but we got to continue to make sure that we evaluate where we are and go forward. And so that's kind of in the public safety side of my job. But there's also a very different role that an Attorney General plays, and that is to have influence outside of the state of Alabama. For example, I filed what they call an amicus brief or a supportive brief of a situation in Pensacola where they had a cross in a park for 26 years where it was challenged and we said it was constitutional, or in North Carolina where a city council was wanting to pray before their session and somebody challenged that and we wanted to be able to support them. And so we have the opportunity to be able to make a difference outside of just what goes on in Alabama, but outside of Alabama to make sure that our values and our beliefs are known to others and that we have the opportunity to fight for those things that we think are important.
Okay. How do you think getting to see different communities when you were younger and moving around benefited you for your job today?
That's a great question because I moved a lot. I was in 8 different school systems over 12 years. We lived in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And so, what I think that had for me is I'm an only child, and so I didn't have, brothers and sisters going with me. So I think it caused me to be able to probably make friends quicker because you're thrust in that environment, many times being in new schools for the first time. But the other thing I think it allowed for me is probably to understand that meeting lots of different type of people from diverse backgrounds gave me a better perspective on issues and things and interests that probably helped me maybe broaden my horizons a little bit in a good way. But it also, my father traveled a lot, and so I was most of the time with my mom, and so it probably also very much strengthened the relationship I had with her. She's still the shining star in my life, and I miss her every day that she's no longer here. But it also probably made that relationship better.
Well, in light of the recent school shootings in Florida, what ideas do you have for preventing more in the future?
Well, a couple areas, and we talked about that just a minute ago. We need to always continue to evaluate building security. Many of our schools are older in the state, and that was not a concern when we first started, which meant there are lots of entrances and lots of ways for those who would do bad things to be able to access school in an improper way. And so, we continue to talk about this idea of best practices And so one of the reasons why we have the school safety initiative that the AG's office has been leading is to be able to encourage those best practices around the state and to be able to highlight those schools that are doing it well. So school safety, as far as building security, is number one. Second is that we need to make sure that we're training within the schools on what to do in an active shooter situation. And so I know that our schools have been very proactive in that area and continuing to refine what the plan is for specific schools and to make sure that we're training staff and then doing an exercise in the school so that students know what to do in those situations. The third thing that we're very much a proponent of is encouraging SROs in schools where we have law enforcement present. And I think that serves various roles other than school safety. But obviously a trained law enforcement officer in schools is something that matters, and I think that it enhances school safety. And then beyond that, I told you we're going to gather some people together to talk about where we are. Because one of the things that we have to encourage is for young people or others, when they know of something suspicious or they have concerns, to be able to report it. And it's kind of this sort of you see it, say it idea. And the other thing from those of us that receive those reports, whether they be law enforcement or school officials, is that we understand how to be able to act on those. And so, there may be creative ways to do that through social media or through certain cell phone applications to be able to do it. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about with that group going forward. Are there ways that we can enhance what I think we're doing well in Alabama and continue to be able to do it a little bit better?
Okay. Well, now going into the election, what do you think qualifies you for the Attorney General office that other candidates do not have?
Well, first, the record that I've established already. One of the things that I have the opportunity to do is not just tell people what I'll do as Attorney General, but actually to be able to show them. And we can give them examples on the public corruption side, where we've indicted and convicted prosecutors, indicted and convicted police officers, indicted and convicted public officials, and held them accountable and sent them to prison. Which I think is an important message to do. I think we can point to a record where we've been very proactive with our violence initiative to sort of try to deal with what we see in communities around the state. We had 11 arrests in Selma here not too long ago. We're working with other communities and where our violent crime rate is too high, and so we have been very proactive on that front. We just opened a cyber lab for law enforcement to be able to help analyze digital media, and we believe that's an outreach that law enforcement didn't have before, and clearly skills that they don't have the ability in many of our departments to be able to access. And so we felt like that was important to be in that role and in that function. And then beyond that, you've seen us take stands on some very important issues. I told you earlier about what we've done in supporting Pensacola and what we've done supporting folks in North Carolina. We were very proactive relating to the immigration reform and standing up against sanctuary cities. And so what I think that people can see is those issues that we've been involved with, and what I think they'll see is been very strong and very, very good results. But beyond that, I'm a prosecutor. I spent 20 years of my life trying to hold individuals accountable and being that voice for victims. And so I think what you want in an attorney general's role is somebody that's just kind of a balls and strikes person. Doesn't really worry about politics, but instead worries about what the law requires them to do and to be able to act on that. And we've done it. For example, we've filed, I think, 10 different lawsuits against what we believe is illegal gambling. I think a lot of people would tell you that's probably not smart politics, because some folks think we ought to have that. But my job is not to decide whether it's smart politics, but whether or not the law allows it. And so in those situations, we believe they're illegal. We've won in one of those cases, and we'll continue to push the others. But that kind of goes back to my core, which is that I'm somebody who's spent most of my professional career applying the law in settings where people need to be held accountable. And beyond that, to be that voice for victims, one of the things that we were able to accomplish, it's called the Fair Justice Act, and that was to do a little more streamlined approach to our death penalty cases, because sometimes, and really in most situations, they're taking way too long. The death penalty is something that's not imposed easily, not imposed often, but when it is, I think it's our job to make sure it's enforced. And so what I hear many times are victims who don't feel like necessarily they're getting justice, and that's not just in the death penalty context, but others. And so as somebody who has stood with victims throughout my life, that's something I continue to be able to do here in this role to be able to help them going forward. And so what I think more than anything else is just simply this idea that there's a record, I think, of achievement that people can look to. There's clearly a passion for me to be able to do this job. and somebody that views this really as an amazing gift given to me to be able to serve. And there'll be a 49th Attorney General. I'm the 48th, but we just want to do it a little bit longer and think that we have things to be able to offer to the people of Alabama to continue to do that.
Of course. So, what is your favorite part about being Alabama's Attorney General?
My favorite part, really, I think, is the quality of the work that I get a chance to do and the quality of people that are at this office. I mean, there's some really good lawyers that work here. And as somebody that is a little bit of a law nerd, I really like kind of getting in the academic side of what it is that we do, and I enjoy this idea of practicing law, is that I'm given the privilege to lead a group of lawyers that I think are really good. And then beyond that, we just have some remarkably dedicated people here, whether it be our investigators or our support staff that allow this place to work. And so, you know, now not only am I given the gift to do really interesting cases and really good work, but also I get to do it with really good people. And so, you know, as much as sometimes I miss what is home in North Alabama, you know, the ability to do this every day is just a remarkable privilege. And so probably the greatest thing about it is knowing the gift that I've been given and to be able to take advantage of it with the quality of work and the quality of people that I have a chance to see.
Well, our last question for today, what advice would you give to young people like me who are interested in getting involved in politics?
I think just to be able to follow a passion of service. There's that idea of servant leadership, and I really think that people sometimes look to politics because they kind of get their name in the paper, or they get on TV, or for some reason there are people that are enamored with power and authority. Those people don't do very well. When people choose to get into the political side of the world to be able to serve others, that's where I think true success happens. Is that, you know, ultimately politics is simply about service in a different form. And it happens to be to the people of communities or to the state or to the nation, and to serve in a way that people see ethical leadership from them. And so as a young person, I would say find that area that you're passionate about, whether it be a certain issue or a certain thing that motivates you to be engaged in that, to figure out where your role is. And to be engaged in politics doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in elected office either. You know, most folks aren't. But yeah, you can be engaged in the political sphere in a lot of ways. You know, there are many that, for example, that very much have a passion, let's say about the Second Amendment, for example. And that you can be involved in organizations that have advocacy opportunities around that particular issue. And so there's many ways that you can do it, but I guess understand that there is also a sacrifice that goes along with it as well. You know, in many ways you lose some of the sense of privacy maybe that most folks have in their lives. And so understanding that if that's something that you want to do, that there's some personal sacrifice that goes along with it. Obviously, as somebody who understands that, being in political service now for almost over 17 years of my life, I also understand that sacrifice is also well worth it, considering what I have the opportunity to do, because, you know, it is truly a remarkable experience when you have the potential to serve. But the folks that do it and want to do it need to make sure that they're in it for the right reasons, and then understand that they have an opportunity to be a catalyst for change for good and take advantage of that.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.